This is a special occasion for me because it's the last time I will speak to many of you as a U.S. Senator and as your representative in Washington. But it doesn't mean that I will stop my passionate advocacy for what we all are here for today, which is freedom for originally the captive nations behind the Iron Curtain. Now it is these countries with newfound freedom who continue to struggle with the influence from Russia, sometimes a malign influence by cyber attacks. In the case of Ukraine, very much real attacks, the unprovoked and illegal and brutal war that Russia is waging on that country. So we'll continue to work arm in arm on these issues. And I want to thank everyone here who's both presenting this award and preparing this beautiful meal and enabling us to join together. But mostly I want to thank you for helping me, because this recognition is really about you. Since George Voinovich left the Senate, there were some big shoes to fill, but honestly my involvement was prior to that, because even when I was in the House of Representatives, George Voinovich told me, you will support Eastern and Central Europe. And George was pretty persuasive and a mentor of mine. And that's when I first met you, Rocky, when I was representing Southern Ohio. And got to know the community. Marta has done such an awesome job as the president of the United Ukrainian Organization of Ohio. I was explaining to Simon, who I was going to embarrass and make him come up here so you guys could see his cool Ukrainian tie. You got to see it anyway. But that his aunt is not just a local leader, she's not just a statewide leader for the Ukrainian diaspora, but she's also become a national leader, as Ohio, as usual, is punching above our weight, right? And a global leader, because the people of Ukraine know her and know the organization. They know what MedWish is doing with the organization. They know what our law enforcement is doing with the organization to send healthcare supplies to Ukraine, to the refugees, to send armored vests to the soldiers and to the territorial defense forces in Ukraine from Northeast Ohio, thanks to Marta. In fact, all over the state of Ohio, there are law enforcement agencies who have stepped up to provide helmets, to provide vests, to provide other protective equipment. And we're so proud of that in Ohio. Not surprising, because we're Ohioans, and we step up when we're asked to help. But someone needed to organize it. Marta, you've done a great job. We punch above our weight here in Cleveland, also with Andy Fute and the national organizations that he heads, the American Congress. And it's been really interesting for me to be in Ukraine and at the Polish border and to find Marta and Andy there handing out supplies, helping refugees, and representing us so well. Rocky's joke about the alligator farm means that Kelly probably won't be helping as much on the next lunch. But I want to thank Kelly for her work today, and I want to thank Rocky as always. Judge Perk, you have stepped up. Your dad would be so proud of you. So proud. I already mentioned Irene, and I thank you for your tutoring me early on about not just the issues but the community and who's here and how I need to get around and meet people. And you were happy to do that, and I appreciate it. To Councilman Rackatelli, congratulations, well-deserved award. This award was given to Tony today. It was given to President George H.W. Bush in 1990. How about that? Same Freedom Award. And I know that you appreciate that. So Councilman Polensik has been at every Ukrainian event I go to, and because he's got a heart for this issue and a passion for ensuring that
The community is well represented, not just on council, but in Washington. And so I appreciate your counsel. And whenever I do something in Washington, some of you know I give a speech every week on Ukraine. Give an update, what's going on, what Congress should be doing, what's really happening behind the scenes. And you ought to respond to that, and I appreciate it, and get it around to your constituents. And it's very important we keep the drumbeat going. America is the greatest country on the face of the earth. But we have one failing. We have a pretty short attention span. And we sometimes move from issue to issue, don't we? And particularly with broadcast media and the internet and so on, there's always something new, something in the 24-hour news cycle, people go on to the next thing. We can't leave Ukraine. It's too important. So it's critical that we are here, and critical that those of you who care about this issue keep this flame lit. Someone who's doing this at the state level is Matt Dolan. Because not only does he represent our area well here, the Cleveland area, but he also is viewed as a statewide figure and has the respect of a lot of his colleagues, and therefore members of Congress from Ohio, among others, listen to him. So it's important that he continue to do what he's doing, and I appreciate it. I want to mention Marcy Kaptur because she is the co-chair of the House Ukraine Caucus. She was not mentioned today, but I work with her closely. This is not a partisan issue. This is a nonpartisan issue because it's an issue of freedom and America's national security. I will say that it's going to be harder going forward because of the fact that people's attention span is relatively short, and they're sort of on to the next thing. So the kind of funding that is required to allow Ukraine to continue to survive as a nation is substantial, and our taxpayers are being asked to help again. I think it is a very wise expenditure of money. I would even argue to you today that it's a lot less expensive, just from a taxpayer point of view, than the alternative. Because the alternative would have been, without American leadership, that Ukraine would now be occupied by Russia. And all of the atrocities and war crimes we hear in Bucha and Irpin, and all throughout the Donbass, and behind the lines we found out in Kherson and Kharkiv, as our Ukrainian troops came in and liberated that territory, this would be happening all over the country of Ukraine right now. In the United States of America, even if Vladimir Putin's promise was not kept, which is that he doesn't want to stop in Ukraine, he wants to recreate the Russian Empire, he wants to recreate the USSR. Even if that hadn't happened, and he hadn't gone into these other neighboring countries, we would be right now massing troops along those NATO borders. Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Poland, Romania, Slovakia, other countries, because we would have to. We would have equipment there. It would be more expensive in my view. Ukraine's not asking for our troops. The brave Ukrainians are willing to do it alone, and they will die for their motherland, for their families, for their freedom. But they do need help. They do need tools to be able to survive. I was asked today by one of you, so what was the U.S. military's sense of how long this conflict would last in Ukraine? And I will tell you honestly, this is not a classified, piece of information anymore because it's now been out there, but our military intelligence thought a couple weeks. It would take Russia a couple of weeks, despite the training we provided, despite some of the weapons that we had provided prior to the invasion on February 24th. The second invasion, by the way. Remember, the first one was 2014, Crimea and the Donbass. It has not been a couple of weeks. It's been 9 months, almost a year, come February. Why? Because the Ukrainian people have been so resilient and so tough and so strong and so unrelenting. They've had good leadership from President Zelensky, who has turned out to be one of those people in history where he steps forward and the man makes history rather than history making the man. He has made history, which is pushing back against the Russian onslaught, the third largest army in the world, and successfully now liberating over 50% of Ukraine. Think about that. Over 50% of Ukraine. And thanks to you in this room and taxpayers all over Ohio and the country, we provided them with some pretty darn good equipment. Not all that I would like to see them get yet, we can talk about that, but the HIMARS, for instance, which are what they are launching the rockets with, we have provided now 20 HIMARS, which is what the Ukrainians wanted, and as some of you remember, for a couple of months, I was very frustrated we weren't providing them. Finally, we provided them. Then we provided 4, and then 8, and then 12, and then 16, and now 20. Guess what? In this horrible war, with all the atrocities and all the back and forth and the heavy bombing, not a single HIMAR has been destroyed by the Russian army. Not one. So, our taxpayer funding goes to the HIMARS, it goes to Ukraine. It enables them to take the Kharkiv region back, that oblast. It enables them to go into Kherson, and most recently actually push the Russians out of Kherson, the one provincial capital the Russians took and the first big city they took. The HIMARS were as important as anything, according to the Ukrainian military that I've spoken to. So, thank you. Pat yourself on the back. It matters. It's not that we are just sending equipment, it's that we're sending life-saving equipment. It's making a huge difference in pushing back against this brutal onslaught. By the way, when I was in Ukraine recently, the embassy told me a story. One of the embassy personnel who had just come back, remember when the embassy was virtually closed down for a while, had come back, and thank God they're back, had ordered some takeout food. Actually, it was a hamburger in Kyiv. And when the hamburger arrived in the bag, through whatever their equivalent is of Uber for delivering food, it's probably Uber, the bag said, "Thank you for the HIMARS." There are a number of children being born in Ukraine today whose first name is HIMAR. So we are making a difference, and thank God we are, because this is about the fight for freedom. This is about ensuring that our ally, Ukraine, that just wants to live in peace with its neighbors, including with Russia, has the opportunity to survive. In 2014, they made a very deliberate decision to stand with us, right? We need to stand with them. And it's not like we're the world's policeman, we're more like the sheriff. There are 50 countries providing military assistance to Ukraine, not just us. But we're like the sheriff that gets the posse together. And without the sheriff, posses don't form. That's why George W. Bush said last week, I saw, when America leads, others follow. When America defaults in its leadership position in the world, that's when chaos ensues. And that's when the world becomes a more dangerous and volatile place. And China is watching, and Iran is watching, and all of our allies are watching too, and wondering, are we going to stand with Ukraine? Are we going to keep our commitment to freedom? Are we going to do as John F. Kennedy said way back in his administration? Actually, it was a speech that he wrote and he never delivered. It was meant to be delivered the night that he was killed at the World Affairs Council in Dallas, Texas. And he wrote, "We, in this generation as Americans, by destiny rather than choice, by destiny rather than choice, are the watchguards on the walls of world freedom." The walls of world freedom are in Ukraine today. We cannot allow those walls to be broached. So thank you all. Thank you all for this wonderful award. Thank you for your friendship, most importantly, for your advice and your input over the years, for allowing me to carry on the legacy of George Voinovich, and allowing me to really have an extraordinary opportunity to help the Ukrainian people to be able to achieve their freedom and to keep the flame of freedom alive. God bless you.